Chapter 24, Sneak Attack Skills. Qin Xian had made up her mind to kick Han Sen's ass. The first time, when Han Sen stabbed her in the rear, she could attribute it to his ignorance, while the harassment on the train couldn't be a coincidence. Having identified Han Sen as a freak and bastard, Qin Xian walked up to him with anger in her eyes and said, "You start." Bang! Han Sen punched her in the face. Clutching her nose and stepping back, Qin Xian stared at him, not believing what had happened. Han Sen was not like any man she had seen. She let him start and he just immediately punched her, which was completely beyond her expectations. That's why she was not prepared for it. They were standing close to each other, so she was hit on the nose. In her understanding, in a showdown, the two opponents should go to the middle and take their positions. And men always acted as gentlemen in front of her. Even if they were weaker, they'd still want to show their masculinity. No one was like Han Sen, who threw a punch without a sign, hitting her face, where she wasn't even covered by protective gear. "I'm sorry, so sorry, have we not started?" Hansen repeatedly apologized. He thought he'd let her beat him to let out the anger, and wanted it to end sooner. He didn't expect that he could hit her nose, which soon turned red. "We had started, and will continue, you, bang." Qin Xian had more to say, but he acted hearing, continue, and hit her on the nose again. She was in so much pain she had to squat on the floor. "You said continue, so I thought," Han Sen quickly explained. "I'll kill you." Qin Xian jumped from the ground. Not caring about the rules anymore, she moved forward and started to beat Han Sen up. Resisting Qin Xian's beating, Han Sen found his fighting skills were much weaker than Qin Xian's, and he couldn't even play defense. He barely got through a dozen punches and was beaten down. Weigh less than 50. See you next time. Qin Xian turned away, leaving behind Han Sen, who was wounded all over. Han Sen stood up with a wry smile on his face. Wearing a combat suit, he wasn't injured seriously. It was just some pain he would have to put up with. The worst part was he seemed to have enraged Qin Xian even more. After Han Sen left the station to return home, Qin Xian took a shower and was about to delete the video and data of the fight right away. She was the station master and the strongest woman in Steel Armor Sanctuary. There was no way she'd let people see the video of herself being punched in the nose by ass freak. Before deletion, Qin Xian watched it again, and she was momentarily shocked. She thought that the reason she was hit was that Han Sen took advantage when she wasn't prepared. After carefully reviewing it several times, Qin Xian suddenly found that although this was a very important reason, it couldn't fully explain her being hit. Was it, thought Qin Xian, and repeatedly watched the part when he hit her and compared the data collected by the combat suit. So, his fist fighting skills are really poor, just about the normal level of a compulsory education graduate, but his movements were explosive and unexpected, Qin Xian mumbled as she was checking the data. And there was something about him, like a killer. Before he made a move, I could not predict his intention, and that had left me unguarded. When he threw a punch, there wasn't even the slightest change in his emotions, not even when he was hitting hard. The separation of behaviors and emotions should belong to a good assassin, a fatal blow under ordinary cover. No, he just graduated, and there is no way he is an assassin. Also, his movements were too bad for him to be one. So, this separation was just his innate talent? Qin Xian could only think of this one possibility. What she didn't know was that Han Sen was really poor when he entered God's sanctuary. At the time he offended both Qin Xian and Son of Heaven. No one dared to be with him, and no one dared to trade with him. The new graduate started to hunt creatures using an ordinary alloy dagger, without any experience. Even just ordinary creatures posed great threats to a beginner, not to mention that they often came in groups, so Han Sen must have taken an individual creature by surprise and killed it. Once surrounded by a group, he could only wait to die. To minimize the danger, he had to ambush and attack, and the most important part was not to alert the creatures, who had more acute senses than men. In the first month, Han Sen was honing these skills. In failure after failure, he learned to hide his emotions and intentions, so that the creature sensed no danger even when he approached. It was like playing dirty, but it was also the only way for him to survive at that point. Later, he had to keep practicing and improve his skills in order to kill primitive creatures, and gradually they became part of his instinct. Although Han Sen's fighting skills were not even close to advanced, he was no worse than a great assassin in his explosiveness and timing. Like an assassin, his skills were also honed between life and death, and the only difference was that it was the creatures instead of men that he killed. Chapter 25, Ghost Haunt. He seems to have great strength, speed and explosiveness, which indicates that he has fairly high geno points, unless he is practicing hyper-geno arts. Qin Xian looked at some data, but didn't worry too much about it. Han Sen's data was indeed better than average, but data like this can be seen anywhere in the shelter. It was only a bit unexpected that it belonged to Han Sen. Talented but vulgar and despicable. I'll just teach him a lesson next time, thought Qin Xian bitterly. Because of Han Sen's sneak attacks, she labeled him as despicable again. It was indeed hard for most people to imagine that Han Sen had integrated the sneak attack skills into his practice and instinct. The reason why Han Sen could hit Son of Heaven in the face was his sneak attack skills. Or else someone like him could never hit Son of Heaven, who had great geno points and hyper-geno arts. Sneak attack didn't sound good, but it was practical. When he got home, Han Sen had dinner with his mother and Han Yen. The next day, he did not go to God's sanctuary but took the train to a martial hall. Han Sen had only learned basic martial arts in the past, and those were designed for people who had no geno points. As one started to gain geno points in God's sanctuary, one became stronger in general. With the practice of hyper-geno arts, the body had become even more unique, and this difference allowed people like him to practice certain martial arts that normal people could not practice. These martial arts can be learned at martial halls as well as at advanced colleges. And martial masters who worked at martial halls taught these for a living. Unlike in ancient times, these martial masters did not rely on their inherited fame, nor did they want to leave legacies. Their only goal was to make profit. So, the more money a student spent, the better martial arts were taught. Martial arts all had certain requirements for physical conditioning. If the requirements were not met, it wouldn't be possible to practice. In the past, Han Sen had no money and no significant enhancement in his physical conditioning. Now with 13 sacred geno points and lots of other geno points, he had become stronger. The practice of jade skin had also helped. Now his physical condition was among the best in his peer group. Ares Martial Hall was famous on Roca Planet. The tuition there was very expensive, but the martial arts taught were very good. The owner of the martial hall was a veteran and was famous back in the days when he was serving. After getting severely injured in a battle, he went back to Roca to open Ares Martial Hall. Everyone called the veteran Old Devil. As long as you paid enough, he would teach you anything, and you could indeed learn some really good skills. Young man, want to learn something? We have elementary classes, intermediate classes, advanced classes and special classes here. You can learn fist fighting, weapon skills, and even hyper-geno arts here. For an elementary class, you could choose to learn a martial art that I define as elementary for $10,000. For an intermediate class, you could choose a martial art that I define as intermediate for $100,000. Advanced classes are each for $1 million, and special classes are each for $10 million. At these prices, I could guarantee a good learning outcome. Fellow, you look like you have a bright future ahead of you. Do you want to sign up for all special classes? All 12 martial arts for only $50 million. Old Devil looked at Han Sen with a greedy smile, like a dragon looking at gold. I would like to sign up for an advanced class to learn Ghost Haunt. Han Sen came here for a reason. His dad had learned from Old Devil and told him Old Devil has a great martial art called Ghost Haunt. Unfortunately, his dad's physical condition hadn't reached the required level for Ghost Haunt, so he couldn't learn it. He always had regretted that and asked Han Sen to learn Ghost Haunt when he grew up. Han Sen also heard from his father that Ghost Haunt was especially effective on women. Han Sen had once again offended Qin Xian, and it didn't look like she would let it go easily. Not willing to be bullied by her, he thought of his father's words about Old Devil and Ghost Haunt and wanted to take the opportunity. After all, 1,000,000 was a piece of cake for him right now. Although Ghost Haunt is among the most advanced, its requirements were even higher than those of special classes. You must at least max out on mutant geno points to stand a chance. How fit are you? Old Devil looked at Han Sen in surprise. No one had chosen Ghost Haunt in a while because of its high entry barrier. You can test me to see if I can meet the standards. Han Sen was not sure whether he would pass either. Technically, with 13 sacred geno points, he should be more fit than those who had maxed out on mutant geno points. 10,000 test fee for a physical fitness test. Old Devil placed a card reader in front of Han Sen. Han Sen took out his credit card and paid 10,000, and Old Devil was quite pleased by his generosity. After scanning and testing in a dozen instruments, the test result was out, which slightly surprised Old Devil. Your physical fitness is very good. You must have almost maxed out on ordinary, primitive and mutant geno points. Can I learn Ghost Haunt? Han Sen gave no reply, as his mutant geno points were less than 10, and sacred geno points and jade skin would explain his fitness. Yes. 1,000,000. Old Devil did not ask further, placing the card reader once again in front of Han Sen. While a bit upset about spending his hard-earned money, Han Sen paid for it. Young man, you have great things lined up for you. Come with me. You'll have to memorize Ghost Haunt first. Old Devil showed Han Sen into a screening room, turned on the hologram and left him alone in the room. It was Old Devil himself practicing Ghost Haunt in the hologram. Han Sen looked for a while, and his eyes widened. He thought to himself, wow, so that's what you mean by, especially effective on women, Dad. Chapter 26, Mutant Three-Eyed Cat. Ghost Haunt should really be called Skin to Skin, as all movements were aimed at one thing, which was to stick on the opponent. Wrapping, blocking and winding, all sorts of movements allowed the body to act like a snake to tightly trap the limbs of the opponent, so that there was no way for the opponent to attack. If the opponent was a woman, with the practice of Ghost Haunt, one would be able to feel her up. If it was a normal woman, she would feel overwhelmed in just a few movements. If I were to use Ghost Haunt to fight Qin Xian, she would consider me even more of a pervert. Han Sen suddenly regretted picking this martial art to learn. However, the tuition was non-refundable. Well, I'll just learn it first and see. Han Sen calmed down and started to carefully watch and memorize Ghost Haunt. With a closer look, Han Sen found that the martial art was not so nasty as it had seemed at first. There were indeed a lot of advanced skills, especially in wrestling and close combat. Many were very practical and could save a life at critical moments. It did indeed have high requirements for fitness, especially for flexibility. Even for those who had maxed out on mutant geno points, it would be somewhat difficult to meet the requirements. The reason Han Sen was able to pass, in addition to his sacred geno points, was jade skin training, which had greatly enhanced his flexibility. The teaching method of Old Devil was straightforward. You could learn the movements from his pre-recorded hologram, and then he would correct you where you made mistakes and remind you where you should be more careful. He could be reached via comlink, and his replies were detailed. Although he charged a lot, he was very engaged in teaching. With a strong body, Han Sen was able to start practicing Ghost Haunt in half a month. But only to get started was not enough. Martial arts that required close combat like this were the most dangerous. If not a master, one could be easily killed in the actual battle. Han Sen would never hunt creatures or fight with others in God's sanctuary using ghost haunt before he mastered it. Qin Xian, if you leave me alone, I'll let it go. If you insist on giving me a hard time, I will have to use you to practice ghost haunt, thought Han Sen. When he came to the teleport station, Han Sen still did not want to see Qin Xian. Looking around from time to time, he didn't see her until he entered God's sanctuary. In his room at Steel Armor Shelter, the primitive copper-toothed beast had become a mutant creature. Han Sen decided to let it keep evolving into a sacred blood creature. At the gate of the shelter, the gang of Son of Heaven was gone. It had been half a month since Han Sen left God's sanctuary, so Dollar was never spotted. They weren't very patient, so they just left. In fact, Son of Heaven had been aware that it was useless to guard the gate, as they didn't know what Dollar really looked like. So even if he did walk in front of them, they wouldn't be able to recognize him. Han Sen left the shelter and went into the mountains, ready to find a remote place to hunt. After entering the deep forests, human footprints became scarce. Han Sen summoned his armor when he was alone and went further into the mountains. Han Sen no longer bothered to hunt ordinary creatures. He would just chase them away or ignore them, and was only interested in hunting rare, primitive creatures for food. Now Han Sen had maxed out on ordinary Geno points and had over 80 primitive Geno points, so he didn't really need commonly seen primitive creatures. Now what he really needed was mutant and sacred blood Geno points. Han Sen wanted to complete his evolution with all 4 types of Geno points maxed out. It would be really slow if he used only the black crystal to do this. For primitive creatures, I don't even need to do the hunting. The mutant beast soul I got from Qin Xian was a pet. It should be able to kill some primitive creatures if summoned. Han Sen looked at the beast soul in the shape of a black cat that he got from blackmail. Type of beast soul of mutant three-eyed cat, pet. Han Sen summoned the mutant three-eyed cat, and a little black kitty the size of his palm appeared. It was rubbing at the foot of Han Sen, looking just like a normal pet cat with its tiny body and wide eyes. Could such a little thing kill those creatures? Han Sen picked it up to take a look, not convinced that a cute thing like this possessed great strength. But then he thought, size didn't necessarily matter. Since it was a mutant beast soul, it must be able to hunt primitive creatures. Seeing some primitive triangular-scaled beast wandering nearby, he ordered the cat, "Go kill the triangular-scaled beast." The little guy meowed and got up its nerve to streak toward the triangular-scaled beast, biting it on the tail. The triangular-scaled beast hesitated and looked back at the cat. Throwing up its tail, the triangular-scaled beast then whipped the cat away like a basketball. The mutant three-eyed cat screamed and ran behind Han Sen's feet, shivering. She tricked me. No wonder she didn't even blink when she gave me this. It's a useless beast soul. Han Sen stared at the cat hidden behind him with widened eyes. Han Sen tried a few times more, and the cat was indeed of no use, not even able to beat the weakest primitive creature, a copper-toothed beast. Chased around and running, it was not like a mutant beast soul at all. Suddenly, Han Sen thought of the type of beast soul. According to his knowledge, the beast souls that can be summoned to fight on their own were normally either fighters or mounts, while he knew nothing about pet beast souls. Chapter 27, SOS. What the heck is a pet beast soul? It's not just for fun, right? I was really tricked by Qin Xian. What am I going to do with it? Han Sen's heart sank, and he killed the copper-toothed beast that was chasing the cat. When he was about to take the cat back, it started to meow around the body of the copper-toothed beast with its mouth watering. Go ahead. Han Sen looked at the mutant three-eyed cat curiously. Normal fighter beast souls and mount beast souls didn't have to eat, and they could just recover in a vacuum once injured. Receiving the approval from Han Sen, the cat rushed to the corpse and started gnawing, but it was clear that its teeth and claws were not sharp enough to break down the skin. Depressed, Han Sen peeled the skin off, sliced the meat with a dagger and fed it to the cat. And this little thing sure could eat. The copper-toothed beast was at least twice its size and it managed to eat all the flesh. Lying on the ground with a full belly, the cat could barely move and Han Sen was almost worried about it. Helplessly shaking his head, Han Sen took the cat back and decided to research the use of a pet beast soul on Skynet when he got back home. Mutant creatures were not so easy to find. Han Sen had been in the mountains for more than half a month, and did not encounter any mutant creatures. He did find quite a few primitive creatures new to him and now had more than 90 primitive geno points. Hunting alone in the mountains was quite boring, so Han Sen would summon the cat to play with and feed for fun when he was resting. The protection from the black beetle armor allowed him to practice ghost hunt even when hunting primitive creatures. Although he was still not skilled at it, he noticed the strengths of this martial art, especially in wrestling. It was very easy to use, and would incapacitate the creatures in a short time. However, close combat can be dangerous, and there were a few times when he used the wrong movement and could have been killed by the creatures. For over a month in the mountains, he had not found a single mutant creature, while he made a lot of progress in using Ghost Haunt. Later, Han Sen no longer needed to rely on his armor when hunting primitive creatures. One of his biggest gains was that he finally maxed out on primitive geno points. Thinking of the fact that he was struggling for ordinary geno points just a few months ago, he was suddenly in a great mood and started to make a fire and barbecue some meat. Help! Help! Han Sen was sharing the barbecue with the mutant three-eyed cat he named Meowth, when he saw a guy in ragged clothes running toward him, crying for help. He quickly got up and looked over there. With just one look, Han Sen abandoned the meat on the ground, took back Meowth and started to run. "Buddy, please help me. I'll give you money, however much you want," cried the man while running. "You can keep your money." Han Sen did not turn his head and ran desperately. You first needed to be alive to spend money, and there were at least 100 Mamo beasts chasing him. Although Mamo beasts were only primitive creatures, they each weighed more than a dozen tons and had the toughest skin. If hit or trampled by one, his internal organs would probably be shattered even with his armor on, not to mention there were so many of them. Even if Qin Xian, Son of Heaven and Fist Guy were all here, they'd have run under such circumstances. "Buddy, not so fast. Give me a hand and I will thank you." Behind Han Sen, the man was out of breath. "I'm in danger as well. Just pray." After running for a while, Han Sen saw a cliff ahead of him with green vines hanging, grabbed a vine and started climbing up. The benefits of the gain geno points and practice of Ghost Haunt were showing. Han Sen was in the air with just a bit of climbing and jumped on a large stone platform extending from the cliff. Seeing Han Sen climbing up, the man also ran over and wanted to follow him. The man was either too weak or too tired, so he slipped down after a few tries. "Buddy, help!" With the Mamo beast less than 30 feet from him, the man was about to cry out. "Hang on!" Han Sen grabbed the vine the man was holding on to and started pulling hard. Overjoyed, the man climbed with all fours, leveraging Han Sen's strength. When he was 30 feet from the ground, he heard Mamo beasts running into the cliff. Han Sen and the man felt as if even the mountains were trembling. With pulling and climbing, the man was finally on the platform. Once on the platform, the man lied down as if he were paralyzed, while breathing heavily, unable to speak. "Friend, what on earth did you do to them?" Han Sen looked down at the Mamo beasts running into one another. They wouldn't even leave after they got up, roaring at the platform. But they couldn't climb up as they were even bulkier than elephants. "Do not mention it. Worst luck ever." The man calmed down, fished out a packet of cigarettes from his pocket, lit one and offered one to Han Sen. "You saved my life and I, Lin Beifeng, will always remember. I will show my gratitude after returning to the shelter. Best with cash." Han Sen looked at the cigarette and knew the man must be rich. A packet of Schwarzwald cigarettes cost more than 10,000, and there was no need to be modest with such a wealthy guy. Chapter 28, Expensive Food. Buddy, what's your name? Lin Beifong threw a lighter at Han Sen. Han Sr. Han Sen caught the lighter and lit the cigarette. Made from the tobacco produced from Schwarzwald, the cigarettes were harmless to the body and especially refreshing. For those who were risking their lives in God's sanctuary, the Schwarzwald cigarettes were definitely heaven sent. Sen, trust me, when we are back at the shelter, you can have as much money as you want. Problems that can be solved by money are no problems for me. They chatted for a while, and Han Sen understood what had happened. Lin Beifong was not only rich, but super rich. He was also lucky to be assigned to a shelter where he had very close acquaintances. So he bought a whole lot of mutant beast souls, armor, weapons, mounts, fighters, etc. He also hired a group of people to hunt with him, wanting to hunt a sacred blood creature. With his great luck, they indeed caught a sacred blood creature, but what happened after was not so lucky. The people he hired either died or escaped, and he just went running into the mountains. After all sorts of danger, he had managed to survive, but lost almost all the beast souls he bought. If it was not for Han Sen, he would have been killed by the Mamo beasts. Sen, how far is our glory shelter from here? Asked Lin Beifong. It's your glory shelter. Han Sen laughed. Lin Beifong was shocked. Sen, are you joking? I came from Steel Armor Shelter, and it takes 2 weeks to return there. #*T. I'm really in the range of another shelter. Lin Beifong was very depressed. He had friends in Glory Shelter, and it was easy for him to buy flesh and beast souls. But it was likely that no one knew him at a different shelter, so even with money it would be hard to buy advanced flesh and beast souls. Hey, what did you do to the Mamo beasts? They are being so persistent. Han Sen looked down again and the Mamo beasts were still there, roaring and standing on their hind legs, trying to climb onto the stone platform. I was walking and got hungry. So I saw a young Mamo beast grazing, and, said Lin Beifong bitterly. It was unfortunate. It seems that we are trapped here for some time, so before they leave, let's be nice to each other. Han Sen laughed. Right, let's do that. Lin Beifong smiled agreeably and approached Han Sen. Sen, I'm so thirsty. Can I drink from your water bag? 10,000 per cup, Han Sen said, narrowing his eyes. **T. What happened to being nice? Cried Lin Beifong. You are paying, I'm selling. Isn't that nice? But your water is too expensive. It is even more expensive than water from planet Snow Spring. And 10,000 can buy a few bottles of that. It can't be water from planet Snow Spring that you have. Lin Beifong glanced at Han Sen's water bag and said. Although this is only water from a pool, we do not know how long we'll be trapped here. Water is life at this point, and we'll die within a week without water. And you think it's not worth it? Han Sen smiled. It's worth it, but my wallet was lost on the way. Could you give it to me on credit and I'll pay you double when we arrive at the shelter, Lin Beifong said. We don't know each other, and you still owe me the life-saving fee. And now you want to get water on credit. You are making this so hard for me. Han Sen looked indecisive. Triple, no, quadruple. Deal. Han Sen took out his own cup and poured Lin Beifong a cup of water. Lin Beifong drank the water in a gulp and gave the empty cup back 3 times for more water. That's it for today. I don't have much water and need to save. We still don't know when the Mamo beasts will leave. Hansen put the water bag away when Lin Beifong asked the 4th time. Sen, you are so strong, so brave and so impressive that you are able to hunt alone deep in the mountains. What do you want? Han Sen rolled his eyes. Lin Beifeng approached Han Sen and said, "Sen, my beast soul was completely destroyed on the way here. Now I feel so insecure with no beast soul on me. Do you have extra beast souls to sell?" Speaking of beast souls, Han Sen had killed quite a few primitive beasts in recent days and had gained no beast soul. He might have used up his luck on the 2 sacred blood beast souls he got. No beast soul. Would you like some primitive meat jerky? Yes, of course. 10,000 per piece. Sen, this is such a small piece. Trapped on the stone platform for 8 days, they still didn't feel like the Mamo beasts would ever leave. We cannot wait any longer. We must find a way out, Han Sen told Lin Beifeng solemnly. We still have some food and water. Let's wait. And maybe the herd is about to retreat. Lin Beifeng had a lingering fear about the Mamo beasts. We still have water and food, as well as physical strength. When we have used up everything, we would stand no chance, Han Sen said. But how is it even possible with such a herd? Lin Beifeng said bitterly. So we will have to climb up. Han Sen pointed to the cliff above. Lin Beifeng looked at the cliff standing straight into the clouds and suddenly shuddered. Are we capable of doing this? We have to. It beats waiting to die, and we don't have to climb over. If we could climb up a bit and find somewhere to stand, we could just walk around and go down on the other side of the cliff, Han Sen said. Sen, I agree, Lin Beifeng quickly said. Great. We will start to climb now using the vines. Han Sen grabbed a vine, made sure it was tough enough and began climbing.